Welcome to the Pop Culture Lab, where we break down your favorite movies and music. This week, we're reviewing Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Cameron, let's get in the lab.
How's it going, Connor?
Well, hello there.
Welcome back to the lab, sir.
Yes, we're back in the lab again. Back in the lab again.
Back in the saddle.
That's right.
Maybe a saddle is a little more appropriate for this episode.
I think so, yeah. I was almost going to call you a fair maiden until I remembered that you're not.
Yeah, good sir.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Well, this is going to be fun. We both enjoyed this movie. We watched it over the weekend and had a good time.
We did. This one is fresh, hot off the press.
Absolutely, yeah. It's getting good reviews. I feel like I've heard a lot of buzz among our friends about seeing it.
Definitely. For a pop culture podcast, we're finally talking about pop culture.
Yeah, we're on the front lines.
That's right, cutting edge.
Well, what have you been watching, man?
What have I been watching? We talk about The Mandalorian every week. That hasn't come out yet, so I'm looking forward to that, but I haven't watched it yet. You know what I did watch on the heels of this movie is the Vacation remake. It stars Ed Helms, and I don't know if you've seen the original Chevy Chase Vacation movies.
I saw Christmas Vacation.
Yeah, European Vacation,
Yeah.
Christmas Vacation. But this was a remake, and the reason I watched it is because it's directed by the same duo who directed Dungeons & Dragons.
Oh, nice.
I think actually written and directed in that case. Game Night, which is a absolute personal favorite of mine, was just directed by them, not written. Which was interesting because I was going to do some tie-ins with Dungeons & Dragons and Game Night, and they share a lot, but it's interesting that it wasn't actually written by them.
Not writing credits.
Yeah. But anyway, Vacation was really fun. It was a good... I think it really played well to the feeling of the original movie. It was uproarious. It doesn't have great reviews, and structurally, it's not the best thing ever. And sure, you can find flaws, but
it's got good jokes.
If you're just talking about laughing at a comedy, I was dying.
There's something to be said for that. Sometimes that's all you really want out of your movie-going experience is just a laugh at the jokes and the situations.
Yeah, and since these two did write Dungeons & Dragons and this movie, I do find that I just really like their sense of humor and their directing sensibility, and they're just so funny to me. And a shout out, I was going to maybe talk about this later, but one of the directors is John Francis Daley, who was kind of the main character on Freaks and Geeks, like that little kid. Mm-hmm. He was also in the movie Waiting with Ryan Reynolds, which is like a restaurant movie, and he's the kind of guy who's the new guy to the restaurant who's quiet the whole movie, kind of getting like treated as a punching bag for the whole movie until at the very end in the last scene he like unloads on every employee in the restaurant. So he has a lot of acting experience too, but has since become more of a writer-director, but he has great roots in some comedy movies and shows.
I'll have to see that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you haven't seen Freaks and Geeks, I cannot recommend that highly enough.
Yeah, I mean, I know its reputation, but I haven't seen it, no.
It's OG Judd Apatow,
yeah.
Seth Rogen starred, James Franco. Really good stuff. What are you watching?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's more of the same. I've been cruising through almost all the second season of His Dark Materials over the weekend. It's really good. It keeps getting better. I think you would love this. The girl who plays Lyra, who's the main character of His Dark Materials, is in Logan, one of our favorite superhero movies. She plays like the little baby Wolverine.
Oh, yeah, X-23.
Yeah, exactly. And when she was like 13 or something, she was in that movie and got a ton of accolades, and I totally forgot about it. And here she pops up in His Dark Materials, doing a great job. She's 18 now, but I'm like, I mean... I'm not exactly a fan of child actors, and I've given the Star Wars universe in particular a lot of flack for how bad they are at casting. But they actually just casted her to be in one of the like 20 shows they have coming out, The Acolyte. So she's going to be in that too.
Oh.
Full circle.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I guess they're starting to get their child actor chops together.
They heard this podcast and they listened to you. When was she cast in His Dark Materials? When was this season made? Because I want to say that Logan was made in like 2017.
And
so
this
she was 13.
Not long after that. She was...
Well, it had to be 5 years, right?
Well, I think His Dark Materials came out in like 2019 or something.
The
I want to
first
say
season, but did she show up then or only now?
Oh yeah. She was in. I mean, she's the main character of all 3 seasons.
Oh
yeah.
And you only just now made that connection?
Yeah. I had totally forgotten. I guess it's been a while since I saw Logan. It was since it came out, and so I didn't immediately recognize like, oh, that's the person from Logan.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But it makes me want to go and watch Logan again because I think she's an incredible actress.
I recently rewatched it. It is so good.
Yeah, holds up.
Yeah, if anything, it only gets better on additional viewings. It's more sophisticated than we deserve as a superhero movie community.
It's quite a bit elevated in what it's exploring, if I remember right.
It is, yeah. A lot of grief and death and
aging.
Legacy. It's very serious. It's very well done. There's the rumor that we talked about to tie this all back to the other things we've talked about. It's rumored that James Gold might direct Swamp Thing.
Mangold.
What did I say?
James Gold.
Oh, hello, James Mangold. Sorry, I stuttered there. Might direct the Swamp Thing.
Oh,
for
nice.
DC.
That would be great.
That'd be awesome. He's a very clever director.
That would be great. Yeah, I mean, I need to watch more of his stuff, but I loved Logan.
Ford v Ferrari was really good. Of course, not superhero, but really good. He also actually directed a different Wolverine movie.
Did he?
The Wolverine.
Oh.
The one that takes...
Not X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Hell no. Hell no. No. Even Ryan Reynolds hates that movie. I love that in Deadpool 2 or whatever, when he like goes back in time and like assassinates himself in that movie. Super funny. But no, it's called The Wolverine, and it was probably made a year or two before Logan, and it takes place all in Japan. It's like this historical journey of Wolverine.
I totally missed that one.
It's pretty good.
Huh.
It's not Logan, but it's very enjoyable.
I'll have to watch that.
It's Logan Light. It's the popcorn version. It's really fun.
Well, I mean, we'll have to see if they bring the X-Men back. I mean, they're clearly saving that for something.
There's something, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely, there's something afoot here. We've been hearing all sorts of rumors about changes and shakeups at Marvel. We've seen a couple longtime leadership in Marvel disappearing in the last couple of weeks, and we've seen also some bad news about Jonathan Majors, who has been arrested on some domestic violence accusations. So there's a lot up in the air
with his text messages that are supposed to absolve him in massive air quotes here.
Yeah, they did not reflect very well on him. Those text messages that he released about the incident.
I know. I was like, wait, I know this psychological manipulation from somewhere. I used to do this to my brother. Don't tell mom and dad. Tell him it was all your fault. I made Connor punch me in the face. I took his goldfish.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. I told them that I tried to take your goldfish. It was my fault.
It was all my fault for trying to take your goldfish that you socked me in the eye. Yeah, no good.
Yikes. Well, anyway, let's not get off on such tangents.
Yeah. I mean, I was really just saying that I think that whatever plans they had at Marvel, I think they're reevaluating, and there could be a lot up in the air in terms of where they go for the next stage. And so, I don't know. I think it was actually confirmed that Hugh Jackman is signed on to be Wolverine at least one more time in the Marvel universe.
Well, it's complicated because that's for Deadpool 3, which is supposedly crossing over into the MCU. So I wouldn't so much say that it's like going to be an MCU movie as it's going to be in a movie that pulls those characters into the MCU.
It's also complicated now.
I know.
It's so far-flung.
It's closer to Sony than the MCU.
Yeah.
But one last thought on that, actually. I don't know yet if they're at the reevaluation phase. They may just be in the wait and see phase because Warner Brothers played that game with Ezra Miller, and it seems to have paid off.
Yeah.
These are probably more damning charges, but his were pretty bad too. They involved abusive behavior.
Definitely.
And
violence
but time has been on their side in this case. They've just kind of waited and swept it under the rug, and he said that he's getting help and all that stuff, and they're moving forward with everything. In fact, I don't think it's off the table that Ezra Miller is going to stay as the Flash in the DCU. I'm not even sure that's a no-no.
Who knows? I mean, they haven't committed one way or the other,
right?
And you and I both know that there are some high-level meetings going on at Marvel and DC both about just this. They're having their lawyers and their marketing people all, I'm sure, putting in overtime to try to figure this out.
Well, and it probably comes down to like bad press versus money.
Yeah.
I mean, can we just sweep this under the rug and hope this megastar brings us as much money as we hoped in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, hate to say it, but that's the equation. They're in the money making business, and if they can just let this all go away over time, they have Jonathan Majors signed on for I'm sure what is a huge deal, and he's going to be in at least 2 Avengers movies, to say nothing of other appearances in Loki and movies like Ant-Man. It would be a big pivot. It would be a huge pivot.
It's the path of least resistance for these studios
to just let it the word die down and then bring it back in a while.
Yeah,
we'll see.
But then again, one last thought on this. I do think particularly male to female abuse is held in a special place, and it may not be something that they can just move past. Ezra Miller was abusive, but he was just kind of threw a chair at some people, or
it wasn't sexualized violence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do think that sexualized violence is a bit hotter. It's a bit worse, so it could be enough to just re-steer the whole ship just because of the nature of it.
Yeah, we'll just have to see. I mean, I have a feeling this is not going to be announced what is going to be decided anytime soon. No. I think we're going to have to wait on this one. So we'll probably not bring this up too much until there's some big news item that comes out.
Yeah, we'll be reviewing Loki too, and we probably won't even know
That'll
yet.
Be weird.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Dungeons and Dragons.
Let's do it.
Honor Among Thieves. This movie was very honorable. Let me just say that right off the bat. I was honored to be seeing the Honor Among Thieves.
There was a surprising amount of heart, I would say, for a movie that was pretty happy-go-lucky. There was not a whole lot of weighty conversation, but I think when they did it, it landed.
It did.
There was some real honor. I mean, to your point, I think it was really an arc about the main character finding his honor.
Right, but it also spoke to the dishonor of the betrayal of...
Sure.
Anyway, we'll get into it. But yes, I agree. So, Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves is a fantasy adventure / comedy. I would emphasize comedy because there's a lot of it in this movie. It's based on the beloved game Dungeons and Dragons from Wizards of the Coast here in Seattle. Shout out.
I had a birthday party at Wizards of the Coast when I was a kid, I think.
Oh, I guess you did. They had a location.
Yeah. It was like
still a thing?
It was like a game store /
yes.
They had a computer lab type deal, like an internet cafe, and then they had places to play board games and card games.
I think they still had a Wizards of the Coast at Northgate.
That was where it was, I think.
Yeah, until Northgate was no more.
Yep. But
it was the original mall. The first mall to use that term in this country.
Yeah.
I dare you, listeners, tell me I'm wrong. I've researched this. It's a true thing. Back to the plot. So, based on the beloved game from Wizards of the Coast, there was also another movie made with Jeremy Irons in 2000.
Terrible.
Yeah, shall not be named. Chris Pine stars as Edgin, who, along with Holga escapes from prison in the beginning of the
Michelle
movie.
Rodriguez.
Yes, Michelle Rodriguez. Yes, thank you. In the beginning of the movie, they are prisoners in this crazy, scary prison meant for like the worst of the worst. They escape prison and they basically go on a journey to recruit a gang of medieval misfits, some of whom they know, some they don't, to save Edgin's daughter from their traitorous compatriot named Forge, who is played by Hugh Grant, who has previously betrayed them with the help of a red witch to steal what they were trying to steal initially, which was this, what's it called?
It's like an amulet of resurrection or something like that.
Yeah. Tablet of resurrection. So the whole plot centers around that, and they're trying to get it back. So that's basically the plot.
Yeah, and you might notice where we have curtailed our long tangents through the plot this time. I think we've decided that it's too hard, especially in a movie like we covered last time with Everything Everywhere All at Once. It just keeping track of all the little individual plot bits, that's not our wheelhouse. So we're gonna keep it light and easy going through the plot, and then we're just gonna go into our takeaways.
I mean, personally, I really liked a 40-minute plot summary with our interjected opinions every 5 seconds.
Losing track of where we were and then repeating ourselves.
Yeah, boy, that cannot be the reason we're not getting more listeners, can't be.
Yeah, so let's jump right into it. This was a fun movie. I had high expectations. Neither one of us is a Dungeons and Dragons guy.
No, if anything, that would be you.
If anything, I mean, I'm definitely knee deep in fantasy, but never really played Dungeons and Dragons. Somehow I managed to avoid that.
No, you've never even played once?
No. I had a friend who made his own kind of version of a Dungeons and Dragons game that was in space, and so it didn't use any of the materials of Dungeons and Dragons or anything. It was a
in space
homemade version, much more Star Warsy.
It's kind of lame, to be honest. Nerd.
Apparently, I mean, this is something that we're gonna not get into very much because this is not our wheelhouse, Dungeons and Dragons, but there's a whole community, of course, around Dungeons and Dragons, and that is what I played in is apparently called a homebrew version of Dungeons and Dragons. It's literally somebody kind of made up their own rules, just using the general guidelines of how a Dungeons and Dragons scenario would go.
With Pilsner malt and...
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Pilsner. Good one.
Heyo. That's a knee slapper. Yeah, no, we don't know very much about Dungeons and Dragons, so I think a lot of this movie is filled with Easter eggs and references, and
that went right over our heads.
Yeah, I've since watched some breakdowns, and it's an interesting thing where they feel like more subtle Easter eggs than we're used to. You know, when you're watching a comic book movie, the Easter eggs are often very visual and, you know, they kind of call out to themselves. I was understanding from the breakdowns that I was watching that a lot of the Easter eggs in this movie are kind of, you have to almost, I don't want to say read between the lines, but they're sort of situational. They're hidden in the way that characters act and the decisions that they make, because there's these things called I don't know what's it called, like a visibility roll, they
call them perception checks.
Perception check, that's what it is. Thank you. And so I didn't even know what that was, and so there are ways in which that manifests itself in this movie, and now that I understand that better, I'm impressed by how clever it is. But again, it did totally go right over my head.
But I think that is the biggest strength of this movie, is that when you have any movie in a fantasy setting, you are gonna lose a lot of people who are not diehard fantasy fans, right? I mean, if it gets too wacky and wizards and dragons and stuff, a lot of people just are not on board for that. And so they already had that challenge without getting into the deep lore of the rules or of how it all works. So I love that this movie, you and I had a great time watching this movie, and we didn't feel like we were missing anything. But if we were Dungeons and Dragons aficionados, we would have had another experience that would have been even differently rewarding. We would have gotten things out of this that we didn't, that would have enhanced that experience. But you and I are not, left feeling like we missed something.
Not at all. No. I mean, I almost wish I had played more so that I could have gotten some of that out of it. But it did not hold the movie back in any way whatsoever. I think, to your earlier point, they did kind of play down things like heart, to some extent. I mean, the heart
it was pretty whimsical, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I have heard the criticism lobbed at this movie that it is a bit Marvelified in a way.
Yeah.
Which I do and don't understand. I think the most of the way in which it's Marvelified for me comes kind of in exactly that, where it's not fully committing to the emotionality of the movie. The jokes are fast and furious, and they almost always work.
Yeah.
But to your point, they sacrifice a little bit of character building and emotional beats for comedy.
It's quippy. I think that's what people are catching on to in terms of the Marvel.
But it's also vibe. Just really funny.
Yeah,
like Marvel
funny.
Isn't that funny? Yeah. It's quippy. It's winky, and this has some of that, but way more like actual well-written comedy, which for me makes it much more like Vacation and Game Night. Mm-hmm. So I think it actually shares more in common with those movies than it does a Marvel movie in some ways for me. Which might sound weird because it is a fantasy adventure with comedy. So, in a lot of ways it does share more with Marvel, but I've never laughed out loud in the same way at a Marvel movie I guess that's the biggest thing. Is the comedy, I think, elevates it to something like a true action comedy, a true adventure comedy, like Princess Bride. I found myself feeling like I was watching That's a perfect example. More like Princess Bride to me. I think of that as a comedy, not this action adventure thing, which is what I think of Marvel as. You know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean. When we got out of the theater, we were bringing up movies that it reminded us of, and I think I said The Goonies.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Which is, it has the adventure, but it's also not taking itself very seriously. There's a lot of the comedy and the heart comes just from watching these characters together and how much they care for one another and how much they give each other flack. I loved that. I think that is something that really worked for this movie, is they did make fun of each other a lot, but it was always in a kind of a loving, supportive way.
Yeah.
Like the wizard who sucks, who has no self-confidence and everything. I mean, pretty much the entire movie, Chris Pine is just like buffing that guy up. Like, he's just like, you got this, you got this. He spends the whole time like telling him that he believes in him, even though he doesn't believe in himself. And that is throughout this movie. There's really a loving relationship between Michelle Rodriguez's character, Holga, and Edgin.
Yeah. Which doesn't border into romantic love, we should be clear.
At all. But it's a platonic, almost like a brother and sister love, and you really do that comes through. Their relationships are really pretty well thought out, I think.
They are, and I would agree it's done mostly through showing and not telling.
Yeah.
There's very little like exposition dialogue about why I share this history with Holga and why we're so close. They just do some flashbacks and show them raising this child and
then immediately just throw you into their dynamic.
Right. But throughout the whole movie, to your point, they're building that dynamic in subtle ways. And love, especially in this dynamic, I wouldn't even necessarily highlight that word. I would say respect. Like, what I really get from Holga and Edgin is this mutual respect and understanding. And they're very different. They go through the world very differently. But they almost never really clash about that. There's this like kind of mutual understanding.
Well, and when I think there's a couple instances in the movie where that really comes into play, when they are facing the dragon in the caves there and they get kind of buried. The dragon, it has them cornered in this cave, and it's starting to fill up with water. And Edgin tells Holga to start slashing at the dragon, and she doesn't even question it. She just immediately starts doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that really shows the trust between them, that like there's no argument. They just immediately go right into it.
Agreed. And to skip to the end, the moment when he decides to use the tablet of resurrection on Holga
on her,
instead of his wife, who he'd been trying to resurrect for the entire movie. Yeah, that scene worked because of all the between the lines stuff that had been done up until that point. They didn't beat you over the head with it. He didn't give some speech in that moment. They just, again, they touched on the flashback with the daughter showing how Holga has really been her surrogate mother. But yeah, they let that work speak for itself. And I actually didn't see that twist coming.
Yeah.
And it was so much more earned for all the reasons you're saying than if they had done some corny thing.
And that was the arc. I mean, we were, in our Quantumania review episode, we talked about how we felt like there were just no stakes for any of the characters.
Can I just say that we use this movie as like our measure for crap? In every episode, we're like, well, it wasn't Quantumania. Remember when they friggin' did this?
Well, I want to like point to a contrast here.
No, you're right. It's a good one.
At the end of this movie, there's something to be lost. He has spent the entire movie trying to get this amulet of resurrection so that he can bring his wife back. And at the end, he does get to bring back Holga, but that means that he is losing. There's only one, it's a zero-sum game. And so he is giving up what he has been looking for this whole movie, essentially.
Yeah, even longer than the plot of the movie. Years.
Right. So for the viewer's experience, you get kind of what you would get at the end of a superhero kind of movie. The gang gets to survive. Holga is alive.
Sequence.
Right. And and you get that reward of it's going to be okay, but it's bittersweet. It's it's hard. It's a hard fought thing. It's not just seamless and they go on like nothing happened. It means that he's having to really let go of his wife forever.
Right. A real sacrifice is made.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Another example of that in this movie is the scene between Holga and her ex, which is a cameo from Tiny Bradley Cooper.
Yeah. Halfling Bradley Cooper.
Yes.
So funny.
It is funny, and don't get me wrong, it's a visual gag, but I was surprised in that scene with how earnest it was.
Yeah, it was.
There was a mutual respect between them, and she had kind of an emotional response, but it was respectful of the choices that they had each made.
Well, and he was like being really real with her.
Yeah.
Like he's like, you can't get over the fact that you left your tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there, it was situationally funny just because of the size dynamic between the two, but they didn't use that to make fun of him.
No.
He was a real person, and they didn't. Yeah, they kind of left it like that, pretty sincere.
Well, and that's why I question the Marvelification critique, because I think when Marvel oftentimes quips about their characters, they do often end up undermining them.
Yeah.
They
let it breathe. They gave it a beat for that to really sink in, the effect it was having on Holga.
Right. It was Marvel-esque in the sense that they're sort of like relatable characters put in these way over the top situations. The expressions they use, like the paladin who didn't understand any of the euphemisms.
Yeah.
Well, they were all things that we say in our world.
Yeah.
They weren't caught up in trying to make it sound all medievally.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is the Marvel-ishness of it is like putting kind of real characters in over the top situations and making them quip about it. But like you said, yeah, they keep them as real people, and not because they spend 20 minutes of Chris Nolan style exposition dialogue telling you why they're real deep people. They just showed it, and we talk a lot about show don't tell, and this movie didn't do anything crazy. They didn't explore any of the themes that we're talking about are pretty surface level.
Definitely.
I would say that they all just succeed on an emotional level. It's not like the movie spends time to explore them in any deeper way.
Right.
But that's fine. I would rather have a movie just have its emotional beats land and have it peppered with a ton of great comedy, than to get caught up in trying to explore these themes more deeply and then missing the mark. That's worse to me.
Yeah, it knew what it was trying to do, and it did it well.
Yes.
And I give it a lot of kudos for that. To take a brief detour onto the paladin character, who was one of my favorite characters in this movie.
Jean Page.
And he was perfect for this. He was perfect, literally.
My fiance would agree with you.
And that's the whole joke of the thing, is that he's just too perfect. What I love, after having watched this and then looked a little bit in the subreddit for this movie about people reacting, which I always try to do after I see a movie that I enjoy. One of the things that we didn't catch on to that Dungeons and Dragons fans would get is that character is essentially like a Deus Ex Machina. In Dungeons,
like an NPC equivalent.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Somebody that what they call the dungeon master, who's the person who's making all the decisions about how things go in this game. He kind of inserts a character to help the party along with their quest, and this character is usually like super overpowered and impossibly perfect and knows everything. And so this is clearly a reference to that. And so you and I didn't know that. But there is this instance at the end when he bids them goodbye and he just walks off in a completely straight line.
Yeah, going nowhere. Yeah.
Which was, even you and I caught on to that he's an NPC, essentially. Like he's not all there.
Yeah, my instinct in that moment, that's where I started to clue in that he was... Yeah, like not kind of real. Yeah. I was like, that NPC came into my brain, but then I thought, but this is like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think that's really a thing.
But it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the funniest things. And to go back to the humor in general, there's a lot of written jokes that really land. What comes to mind is the scene with the corpses.
Definitely.
The questions.
Yes.
That's just very clever writing.
It
It's
was
almost
so Monty Python.
Very Monty Python. It was like Monty Python meets Abbott and Costello. I don't know.
Right.
But very Monty Python, yeah.
I love the one who they ask him what's 2 + 2, and he says, "I'm not good at math."
Yeah.
And then just dies.
That was very Monty Python. And just the whole conceit. I'm not dead yet.
Yeah.
It was very that.
Leaving him there because they haven't asked him a 5th question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very Monty Python.
The question's 3. It is. That's a good point. Very Monty Python. But that was where the comedy writing really shone. But I think that there's also a lot of moments of visual comedy, and more than most.
Yeah.
To go back to Quantum Mania, MODOK was obviously a visual joke.
Right.
But also...
just because of how weird he looked.
Yeah, but it almost felt She-Hulk-esque, where it's like Marvel...
Uncanny Valley kind of weirdness.
And kind of admitting, our FX artists are all tied up. And
which they have
disaster.
done. Which they did. Yeah, they explicitly said in She-Hulk that they had kind of an in-joke.
So I don't love that.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to have visual gags that are intended to be so, not this kind of like result of other issues, they're meant to be visual gags. I wasn't necessarily blown away by the CGI in this movie in general. It was fine. But there was a few things visually that I really enjoyed. And I'm starting with comedy, but there's a lot of things that weren't comedy.
The chase scene, the chase out of the castle.
The chase scene when she was turning into all those different animals. So one of the people that they recruit is this, what's she called? Druid. Yeah.
She's like a shapeshifter.
Yeah, but she can only turn into different animals. Beasts, actually. I was learning that technically the owl bear...
Look at you.
...is something she would not be able to turn into because it's considered a monstrosity.
I love how you're doing a deep dive into D&D now.
I'm just ripping off other YouTube videos.
Oh, okay.
But, so, I didn't have that thought originally. But anyway, that scene visually was really, really cool. It's obviously something they must have shot practically with some kind of like...
It's all one shot.
Yeah. So it must have been like a tennis ball on a stick kind of classic thing. And so that was awesome visually. The hither thither stick, having a portal.
Anybody who's played the game Portal will recognize that as a portal gun. Yeah.
Portal. But when they do it in the painting, and then they put the painting under the carriage of that thing, that was all brilliant visually. The scene where Simon the Sorcerer projects an image an illusion of Chris Pine playing his lute to
you and I
distract
were
these
both
guys.
just dying laughing
I was
that scene.
Absolutely in tears. I told you this right before we started the podcast. I wished I could have paused the movie in the theater just to collect myself. I had to like look away from the screen and get it together. I felt like I was about 4 years old, and when you have the giggles so much that you just can't even get it together.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. So that was another visual gag that was just hilarious. The fat dragon.
Right.
I mean, the list goes on. I think I was thinking of some that I'm now forgetting.
I mean, another one that was almost a reference to the first Avengers movie was at the end with the owlbear smashing the red wizard to bits. You know, that was very much
very Hulk.
It was very much that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was shot the exact same way.
It seems like an homage more than a ripoff. It's so clear.
Friggin' had to be.
Yeah.
It was the first thing that came to my mind. Yeah. That's how it feels. Remember from Ragnarok?
Yeah.
Remember that from Ragnarok, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. This movie was great. I think we both loved it.
Yeah. We can talk about any criticisms or limitations.
Jonathan!
Oh, Jonathan. That was a visual gag, too.
Yeah, well, and just the woman who keeps on screaming, Jonathan!
Wait, what?
At the very beginning of the movie, the Birdman that they tackle out of the window, there's like some person who...
Oh, the lady. She's like, Jonathan!
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at the very beginning and at the end.
That's right, yeah. But I just thought that was funny, too, because... At the beginning, you're like, why does he keep...
waiting? What's so important about Jonathan? Oh,
yeah.
He has wings.
So funny. And they're like, we were going to pardon you anyway.
Yeah.
That was funny.
So great. I thought that was a perfect way to introduce you to this movie. That it was just, you were along for the ride and strap in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you know... Let's go to our ratings.
Wait, before you do that, I do want to briefly talk about Hugh Grant as the bad guy. Because he was... I really liked what he was bringing to this. I thought he had the perfect, playful...
Smarm.
Arrogant, but kind of funny while doing it. I thought you wanted him to get his comeuppance, but you also enjoyed when he was on screen. I thought he was kind of chewing the scenery, if you ask me.
It's a good way to put it, definitely. Some of his dialogue was awfully on the nose.
Yeah.
But he did a lot with it. Yeah.
Yeah. He was an archetype. He's a bad guy.
He was. But I enjoyed him. I mean, you always knew that he was kind of the villain, but there was a point at which he stopped trying to play the nice guy a little bit. You know, he stopped trying to even pretend that he wasn't the villain, and I enjoyed him the most when he was pretending that he wasn't a villain, but still being one. Mm-hmm. Once he was just kind of all out in the open, it wasn't as much fun for me, but still really good. Yeah. I mean, even speaking of villains, the girl who did the Red Witch, I mean, she was fine.
I did think that the moment when right before the chase out of the castle with the druid, I felt like the moment she recognized that something was off and then pointed and screamed at the druid, I thought that was genuinely terrifying.
It was.
Yeah. It gave that character like more of a sense of a threat when she did that.
Definitely. And not to knock the actress. I mean, I do think she did a solid job. She didn't always have that much lines or much to
No,
work
she
with. She
didn't
just
have
kind
very
of
much
was
at all.
scary and powerful.
It was mostly CGI scares.
Yeah. But one thing, not being a Dungeons and Dragons fan, I just kind of, and I've always been someone who really loves villains, especially really over the top villains with a backstory and everything. So I liked learning about the Red Wizards and their whole thing. And, what is the name of like the really big bad Red Wizard who kept talking to her from the shadows? Oh, I can look it up, but he is apparently a huge Dungeons and Dragons character in general.
Okay.
He's like the king of necromancy, and
Okay.
so I kind of got these kind of cool Sauron vibes from him, and in the way that I didn't know anything about Lord of the Rings when I first watched those movies, but then you dive into Sauron and the history and you're like, ooh, that's a scary, cool bad guy. I felt the same way about what they were doing here. I just thought he was a scary, cool bad guy, and I liked the whole Red Wizards thing. I think he's going to come maybe back if they do a sequel. I like when someone's operating from the shadows, pulling all the strings, especially if they're actually scary and cool and not corny.
Well, and the fact that they did that, they left enough little breadcrumbs that they could bring him back for a franchise if they wanted. But it didn't feel like the events of this movie didn't matter because they were just setting it up for, another 5 movies. This movie stands alone just fine in its own right. It doesn't need any additional movies to be coherent.
Not at all, which was absolutely a strength. That was one of the first things we said coming out of it. Because so many other movies of this type do feel like a bridge to something else.
Well, and there's almost kind of a fake out ending there where when they're sailing away with all their riches from this city that's about to be taken over, I thought that was how they were going to end it. They were going to be clearly giving you some foreshadowing that this big bad is taking over more and more territory, and they're going to bring them back for a sequel. But then they come back to the city, and they, in the main character Edgin's kind of moral arc, aside from using the resurrection tablet on Holga, he also gives away, as he promised to do to the paladin, he gives away all the riches, through the portal gun, through the hot air balloon that's circling the city. He gives it all to the city, which I thought was a nice little touch. It was definitely his honorable arc.
Yes,
that character.
And they didn't actually make a huge point of that.
No,
it just kind of put it in there. Yeah, it was kind of a fake out ending, and I remember thinking the same thing, but I also thought to myself, if it ends now, it does feel like anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Not that a movie like this always has to have some big battle showdown, but it did still feel oddly anticlimactic. I was like, oh, it's over already. So I was glad they didn't end it there, both for the cynical reasons of sequels and stuff, and also just because I think it would have been less strong storytelling. Again, these third acts always do amount to like a big battle, which it more or less was, but we wouldn't have also had all the emotional stuff we just talked about with the sacrifices and the riches and Holga, and so the movie was way better off that they didn't actually stop it there.
Yes, absolutely. And the showdown itself, I thought, was really fun with the hands, the undead hand and then the stone hand fighting each other.
That was cool.
The battle between the bad wizard and or the bad sorcerer and the red witch.
Yeah, the CGI in this, like I said, wasn't like mind-blowing or anything, but it was good enough. It was good. But more than that, the actual depictions of magic were highly inventive.
Yeah.
And like a visual feast. I mean, visually rewarding. Like, we've seen a lot of movies like this. I'm trying to think. Multiverse of Madness is an example that comes to mind because it has magic. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of things visually that I like about that movie, but most of it is the Sam Raimi aesthetic of it. It's not necessarily the actual magic. I think in that movie, that magic's a bit stale by comparison. if I think back to like the first Doctor Strange, which has incredible visual effects, it really does. It's a little bit more like that, where I feel like they're putting their stamp on it. You know, they're showing how this magic is visually different from other things you've seen. You know, yeah, I just really thought that most things were really inventive. I've already talked about the portal thing, but the way in which magic was shown was cool and fun.
There were a million different examples. I mean, that's what I love, is that they don't, for a lot of these big fantasy settings, they don't have to do a lot of work. I think sometimes they overthink it. After watching this, I was finding myself wishing that the Harry Potter movies had done more to really explore the inventive side of magic, because there's a ton of that in the books.
Yeah.
About transfiguring things into something else, or, you know, making use of your surroundings in inventive ways. Whereas in the Harry Potter movies, they kind of just turned into like magic guns. Their wands, where they just like are doing blasts at each other.
Definitely.
And that is, I mean, it was okay, but I thought it really lost a lot of that creativity and inventiveness that made the book so interesting.
Well, like you said, it doesn't explore the variety of the magic and the spells.
Yeah,
this movie had her frozen finger dipping in the coffee, and
the upside down gravity, and the time stopping, and the transfigured hands, and just a million things.
We were talking about this before when the projection of Chris Pine like breaks down.
Yes, the illusion.
You know? Yeah, when the illusion breaks down, the way that happens is visually different than any other magic in the movie, and it's. I think it's kind of like a meta winky like meme thing.
About
I don't know.
Bad CGI.
It kind of it kind of to me looked like bad CGI / like it looked very mechanical. Like when something goes wrong with something mechanical, or when a Photoshop fail.
Yeah.
It was very much laughing at. There was a technological element to it. I don't know how else to say it, but. Yeah, you know what I mean? He froze
totally.
And he went, his like chin went to the side. It just felt very much like that illusion was created by CGI. It was just funny.
Yes. Yeah. I thought just in general it was a very fresh take on things. I got a lot of energy out of this movie. I think it would be fun to have a sequel with these same characters, but the fun about the concept of Dungeons and Dragons is that they could do a sequel with an entirely new cast but that takes place in the same world, and just have a bunch of different bands of adventurers, and it could be a really interesting movie in its own right.
Absolutely. You could make a spin-off show, similar idea.
Yeah.
I agree. I like that. It'd be fun if they did like a trilogy of movies that each had kind of a different cast.
And then bring them together or something.
Yeah.
Or have them intersect occasionally.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Apparently, when they're in the maze at the end of the movie, apparently that other band of adventurers that they keep on crossing paths with is a reference to the 80s cartoon show of Dungeons and Dragons.
Wow.
All of those characters are like, they look exactly like the cartoons.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, this it was a fun movie. It was really great. So let's get to our rankings.
Let's do it.
What's yours?
I've been thinking about it. I think I'd probably give it an 8.5.
Oh, you've moved?
I've moved a little bit. I thought it was really good. It did pretty much everything I was asking for a movie like this to do.
Well, tell our listeners, what was your original
My
rating?
original thinking was probably like a 9. And so I bumped it down a little bit. Definitely when our conversation had some influence on me. But I do think it's a great movie. I would love to go back and watch it again. But it also wasn't necessarily trying anything particularly ambitious for the movie. And so they nailed it. I think they knocked it out of the park for what they were trying to do. But it also was, they were swinging for a double, not necessarily for a home run.
Agreed. Yeah. They were aiming for probably about Marvel level.
Yeah.
Like Marvel on a good day.
They beat that.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. And so I would say they delivered even slightly above where they aimed. But I would also give it an 8.5 because just in my book, it is damn hard to earn a 9. I mean, a 10
is a perfect movie,
which is Taxi Driver. I mean, I could name 10 10s. That maybe that's all. Citizen Kane. I mean, there are very few 10s. So, yeah, for a movie to earn a 9 or higher, I think it has to reinvent the wheel a little bit.
Yeah.
And this movie didn't really at all reinvent the wheel. But it, like we said, it delivered on so many fronts and in an already incredibly saturated genre.
Yeah, that I think is an accomplishment in its own right.
That's its biggest, yeah.
How do you stand out in just a world of these things? I mean, between the Game of Thrones and the Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potter and the Marvel
His Dark Materials.
His Dark Materials. And you're totally right about that. The fact that I would love to see this movie again, honestly. I would see it in theaters. I thought it was hilarious. I had a great time.
Same. I want to drag my fiance to it.
Yeah. And pretty much, I think for a movie that's about Dungeons and Dragons, and that, let's be honest, it does carry with it a little bit of baggage about nerd culture. It's not for everybody. And the fact that it's overcoming that and the word of mouth about this movie is really, really positive. It had a great opening weekend in terms of box office numbers. I think, this is undoubtedly a success. I don't think there's any argument about that. All right, well, that was a good one.
Yeah. Feeling good?
Feeling good. Feeling like I want to go and watch that movie again after talking about it for the last hour.
I think we absolutely should. Yeah. It's such a fun movie. And for our listeners, it's only in theaters right now. It's not on streaming anywhere yet. It may be within the next 90 days, but I'm not aware of a studio or streaming platform that owns it that would be putting it on. Like I know HBO and Disney, they have these deals where things come on their streaming platforms pretty soon after. Yeah. Doesn't have any of this to my knowledge, so I encourage everyone to go see it in theaters. It's really, really good. You won't regret seeing it, and make sure to see it with a lot of people.
Yeah. Get a crew together, get your friends together, and go watch this movie. You'll have a good time.
Drag your friends that think they're not going to like it to it, because they will.
Yeah.
Trust us.
Even if you just like Chris Pine, I think he does a lot with just his natural charisma to carry this movie. So you'll have a good time even just for that front.
And shout out to Justice Smith. We haven't...
The so-so sorcerer.
Yeah. Simon the Sorcerer. We didn't really give him enough credit on this, but he is, in my opinion, one of the absolute strongest parts of the movie and funniest and most heartfelt. Yeah. I think I was just telling you to go watch Detective Pikachu. It's a whatever movie. Our friends at NPR called it like the most middling movie of all time. Which there are worse things you could say.
Perfectly average in every way.
Yeah, which it is. But Ryan Reynolds is the voice of Pikachu, and Justice Smith is like the guy who he's hanging out with. It's like kind of Ash Ketchum fill-in.
Sure.
So it's a cute enough movie. I think it's on HBO. So
fair enough.
If you liked him, I recommend it. I think
it
he's going places in this world. So we sent out a tweet earlier asking for some suggestions for future episodes.
Send them on in.
Let us know. Write in the comments. Email us at popculturelab@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook. I already mentioned Twitter.
YouTube.
Yep, our videos are up on YouTube. They're really just these podcasts with a still image. But we're everywhere, so...
Follow us, subscribe.
Yes.
Tell your friends.
Give us a like. Leave a comment. We'll be your friends.
See you next time.
See you next time.